But first, we begin with the ongoing crisis happening at the border. The images coming in just continuously shocking. And today, intense moments when a bus full of Haitian migrants fought their way off of a Border Patrol bus.
That's right. Those migrants who made their way across the Rio Grande into Del Rio were being transported in a private charter bus with Border Patrol agents on board. Now, this evening, an altercation apparently broke out between the immigrants and agents on that bus. It all went down just 15 miles north of the Sarita Border Patrol checkpoint. Michael Gibson has been following this developing story and kicks off our news tonight.
Clayburgh County Sheriff Richard Kirkpatrick believes that the Border Patrol was transporting a group of Haitian migrants from Del Rio to Brownsville at around 4:30 Monday afternoon. That's when they were heading down Highway 77, some 25 miles south of Kingsville, when the migrants began fighting with Border Patrol agents to get off that bus. Luckily, the agents were able to quickly call for help. A large number of lawmen showed up, including the Clayburgh County Sheriff and his deputies.
What do you think happened on that bus? What do you think happened on the bus?
Well, I believe that in an attempt to abscond into the brush or leave the area, these individuals were able to assault federal agents on the bus and in an attempt to escape. And I think it was at that point when the driver was able to pull over that's when they were able to force the door open and abscond off the bus. And several of them managed to escape custody for a brief moment in time. And agents then had to chase them down, again, get in another scuffle on the side of the road with these individuals to try to detain them. And again, but again, they were able to catch everybody. But nevertheless, this is just a continued case in point of a extremely volatile situation that is getting, out of control as we go forward with this type of continuing thing as the border crisis unfolds.
Sheriff Kirkpatrick also told us that Border Patrol brought in another bus that's used for prisoner transports. They put all the migrants onto that bus. That bus was then escorted by law enforcement officials from a number of South Texas agencies until they made its way down to Brownsville. And by the way, all of those agents involved were said to be okay. Rudy, Leslie.
The hot-button issue of race has now been injected into the administration's inept response to the border crisis. This week, as thousands of Haitian immigrants joined the migration of hundreds of thousands more from around the world crossing the Rio Grande, Border Patrol agents appeared to single out the Haitians for special treatment. This NBC correspondent's tweet was typical of the coverage. Quote, "The agent swung his whip menacingly, charging his horse towards the men in the river who were trying to return to an encampment under the International Bridge in Del Rio after buying food and water." Many countered that narrative. This horse rider noted, quote, "Those aren't whips, they're called split reins. I ride my horses with them." And another tweeted, "The media and Democrats mistaking reins, critical to controlling a horse you're riding, for whips is really the next wild chapter in Elites Don't Understand Rural America." Whether whips or reins, Border Patrol agents were using them as weapons of control, and it set off an unprecedented fury at the administration. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was forced to respond angrily to a flurry of questions.
I have seen some of the footage. I don't have the full context. I can't imagine what context would make that appropriate, but I don't have additional details. And certainly, I don't have additional context, April. I don't think anyone seeing that footage would think it was acceptable or appropriate. We just saw this footage. It's horrible to watch. I just have to get more information on it. Of course, they should never be able to do it again. I don't know what the circumstances would be. It's obviously horrific, the footage.
On Monday night, the Department of Homeland Security's official Twitter account offered a statement, quote, "DHS does not tolerate the abuse of migrants in our custody, and we take these allegations very seriously." Regardless of who, if anyone, ordered the aggressive tactics, the images send a stark message of a Biden administration's racial double standard in its laissez-faire approach to the border crisis, resulting in a tsunami of human migration from over 60 countries worldwide. It has not sought to single out terrorists, sexual predators, the COVID-19 infected, nor anyone else. It is only the darkest skinned among them, Haitians, who have faced such treatment.
Sanitary products? There aren't any. Food? There isn't any either. They don't give you anything. We met Nicholas on the Mexican bank of the river, searching for food and medicine for his family. He hadn't realized until we asked him about it that US authorities are also now flying Haitians back home. There's planes now going deporting people. What do you think about that?
What kills me about that is that everyone knows what we Haitians are going through. There's no president. Crime is high. Students can't go to school. There's no work. The economy is down. People can't put up with that.
Like many others, he said he'd suffered to get this far, on a journey through South America, past gangs and through a patch of jungle called the Darien Gap, notorious for rape and robbery. It was really difficult. I saw a lot of us who died.
The problem for the Biden administration is that this crisis, now spinning utterly out of control, is one of their own making.
The problem at the border is not really that we don't have enough Border Patrol agents, although obviously more resources would help. The problem is more one of policy, where this administration is de facto welcoming, inviting illegal immigration. So until that changes, we really can't even have a debate about legalizing illegal immigrants.
So what you're seeing is part of a much bigger political picture. It's not just about the border. And it's the same strategy as Afghanistan. Ignore, 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 pretend it's not there and not happening. And the biggest thing here, Tucker, is that people keep using words like failure. They say, oh, they failed to act. No, they chose not to act. They chose not to act because they have the outcome that they want.
The outcome they wanted, in effect open borders, has led to this humanitarian catastrophe, which many in the Biden-allied media ignored for months. Now, with images of black people being whipped with horse reins, those Biden media allies are no longer ignoring it. 2 weeks of dismal news for the Biden administration is now extending into another week with another crisis. Doug McKelway for the Washington Examiner.
Mr. President, what's your reaction to the images from the southern border? Get it under control. Get it under control, or you have it under control? We will get it under control.
And Kaylee, we have a soundbite from our president, which we'll play for you, get your reaction on the other side, and whether we can believe, in fact, anything that comes out of this president's mouth. We'll take a watch.
President, what's your reaction to the images from the southern border? Get it under control. Get it under control, or you have it under control? We will get it under control.
It's simply amazing. As he's saying this, what is happening on the Hill is Senator Hawley is grilling Mayorkas, who is testifying about his plan. Hawley said in private, you told me you had a plan. When will this plan stop working? To which Mayorkas replied, it is working. To have the audacity to say something like that, it's an outright lie. We've heard lie after lie. Just yesterday, Mayorkas said, the border's not open. Oh, wait, but migrant crossings are at a 21-year high. There's no crisis, he says, but there were, over the weekend, 14,000. That was the high number of folks under the bridge sitting in human excrement. That's half the population of Del Rio. I think that's defined as a crisis. And then the most appalling lie from Jen Psaki saying they don't intend to stay. Right. They traveled 1,900 miles to sit in human excrement and build tents, makeshift structures out of trash bags. That's what they did. That makes no sense, and we all see these lies.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Secretary, except our time is so limited. I just want to be sure that I understand. 200,000 border encounters over 2 straight months, a record in decades, for over decades, and you're telling me that this is success? Are you happy with what's happening at the border now? Is this success?
Senator, as I said then and I say now, we have a plan. We're executing on our plan, and we will continue to do so.
But you just testified that it's working. I'm just trying to understand. Is this success? Are you telling me that this is successful? Your plan is successful currently?
Senator, we are not finished in the execution of our plan, and I never suggested otherwise. We continue to do the work that we are required to do to secure our border. That is an ongoing process, and indeed we are executing it.
Are you happy with your progress?
People need to put pride aside and realize what works and what doesn't work. What was working under the last administration is definitely something that can stop the flow now, and they need to realize that. We're losing agents. The morale is down. Agents are quitting currently. You know, they have the mandate for the COVID vaccine, so a lot of the agents are choosing, to leave the job. All the while, we're allowing illegal individuals to enter this country that have not received any vaccines, not just the COVID, but the regular vaccines that many of us receive as child. And that's part of the problem. And then, you know, this agency and this administration, they haven't done much to defend agents that are out there. You look at the pictures of, you know, the Horse Patrol. What they were doing out there was within policy. They were not whipping anyone. They don't carry whips. They don't get assigned whips. What they do is a training technique that has been shown to them to make sure that no one takes over their horse. It was to protect the horse, to protect the rider, and to protect the individual that was trying to cause chaos and knock down that rider from that horse. So they twirl that the reins to protect everything and make sure everything's done correct.
First at 5, Texas has to step up. Governor Greg Abbott delivering a message about helping out in Del Rio while visiting that small town today.
A flood of asylum-seeking migrants there, mainly Haitians, was at least in part caused by the assassination of Haiti's president in July and a massive earthquake in August. Garrett Berger live in Del Rio with the very latest and what the governor has to say about all this. Garrett.
Well, we can't get close enough or past this fence to see it, but there is a makeshift camp under the International Bridge where migrants have been camped out. Now, the federal government has begun deporting people out of there, removing thousands so far. Now, Del Rio's mayor says that there are still about 8,600 people left in there. And while it's the federal government that has sent hundreds of Homeland Security personnel to help and also is the one that's deporting people, Governor Greg Abbott trumpeted the state's role in the falling numbers.
Because the Biden administration has been promoting and allowing open border policies, it has been the state of Texas that had to step up and address this challenge.
Governor Greg Abbott hammering the Biden administration today during a news conference for what he called its open border policies. The governor saying the Biden administration must enforce immigration laws.
The Biden administration is a man-made disaster of inhumanity, of epic proportions. It must end. It must end immediately.
Abbott credited the DPS troopers and National Guardsmen he sent to the border with stemming the flow of migrants here.
They have created a steel barrier preventing people from being able to cross the border.
Flanked by troopers, the governor spoke from what had been a busy crossing spot just upstream from the International Bridge.
This dam had facilitated crossings from the Mexico to U.S. side just days ago. Now there's nothing left but trash.
Del Rio's mayor saying it had been a very different scene, calling it a dire situation.
People were bringing in supplies, people were bartering all along the forest line here, the brush line here. They were bartering, you know, equipment, food, plates of food. It was a complete unorganized chaos of people moving out here.
Abbott said the state will keep resources here until the location is, quote, fully restored to total control. The Border Patrol chief has said that he's aiming for all the migrants to be gone from the camp within the week. However, today, Governor Abbott expressed some doubt at that timeline, saying that the Biden administration has shown no capability of being able to process all those immigrants in that time. In Del Rio, I'm Garrett Berger, KSAT 12 News.
Crises batter the administration. Vice President Harris has been booked to appear on The View later this week. Now, on top of that, Jen Psaki says don't expect the president to hold any news conferences anytime soon. Watch this, please.
When's the president going to hold another news conference where we can ask our questions to him about all these issues, about inflation, about the border in Afghanistan?
Well, the president took questions probably 4 or 5 times last week, so I would point you to that.
Well, we need Joe Concha, a media watcher, and we've got him. He's sitting right next to me in the studio, and that's all good stuff. All right, Joe, do you think viewers of the View, very friendly territory, do you think they're going to press hard on Vice President Harris, get some answers?
Wow. It's Rhetorical Tuesday, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah, look, there's a reason why the vice president, you know what she's polling at, USA Today poll? She's at 35% approval. Oof. Right? That's well below the president.
That
Not
hurts.
too much below, but yeah. So, because she has an authenticity problem, right? We saw this during the campaign. They call her a 2020 presidential candidate. She didn't even get to 2020 because she didn't even get to Iowa. She had to drop out before that because she was polling so low, even in her own state. So, look, now she has this thing called a record also that she has to defend as vice president. She was put in charge of the border months ago, Stuart, right? Yep. And what is the result? The crossings only continue to get higher and higher. 208,000 in August, 1.5 million this year. And we're told by the White House press secretary, well, she's addressing the root causes. Okay, show me in any tangible form how she's addressed the root cause and what effect is it having. That's the effect right now that you're seeing on your screen. It is not even a crisis, it is a catastrophe, a humanitarian catastrophe at this point.
Well, what you're really saying is we're not going to get serious questions asked either of the president, because his handlers protect him, and certainly not of Vice President Harris on The View. Rhetorical again. Yeah. You're not expecting any answers, are you?
For the White House press secretary to say, well, the president answered questions last week. I'm pretty sure some things happened on Friday that may have changed the equation in terms of what questions I would ask, which is how were 7 children killed in that drone strike, 10 civilians overall, when you said it was an ISIS-K leader, right? Why did France pull its ambassador from here? Oh, because you did a submarine deal with Australia instead of France. Why did you say the booster shots were coming and got ahead of your own FDA when you're the president who said, listen to the doctors and follow the science? Those are 3 big issues that happened all within the span of an hour on Friday. And Jen Psaki says, well, they answer questions on Wednesday, so I refer you to that. It's a joke, Stuart.
Yeah, you're on a roll here, Joe.
We begin with the crisis at the border. Fewer migrants are now camped under the bridge in Del Rio. Let's go live to Anastasia Bolton with the KENS 5 border team, who is there now. And Anastasia, the numbers are going down. Where are the migrants heading?
Well, first of all, the current number as of this afternoon, according to the Del Rio mayor, is a little over 8,000. Of course, for perspective, to remind folks, that is significantly lower than the 14,000 people that the Border Patrol and the local and state authorities really started out with this afternoon. So before I tell you where the migrants are going, let me kind of explain to you where I am. Because of local folks, we are, and state law enforcement rather, we are inside the location where the migrants are being processed. You probably can see some figures in the distance. That looks like federal law enforcement. And in the distance further down, this is along this is the Del Rio Bridge, are white buses. And the white buses have been coming in and out of this area full of Haitian migrants. And now to where they're going. According to Border Patrol Union, we're told that they're being dispersed through basically every single Border Patrol sector in this area that could take them, because they have to be taken inside a facility to be processed. Now, there's a facility in Eagle Pass. It is, I heard, at capacity, if not over capacity. There are facilities in Laredo. There's facilities in RGV in the Rio Grande Valley. So the migrants are being taken to all of those locations so they can be processed, and then their fate essentially is being determined, whether they are being expelled from the country under Title 42, which is the CDC health order rule, or they are put on airplanes back to Haiti, or they get to stay.
And Anastasia, for the migrants still there, can they leave on their own, or are they being forced to stay under the bridge?
So according to the Border Patrol Union, we understand that folks who are under the bridge are not in custody. They can leave at any time. Now, they can only go back to Mexico, not into the United States. So we were at a place in a camp where you could see sort of behind the brush on the other side is the river and Mexico. And people are still sort of trickling back and forth as they were over the weekend. Not as much, though. The traffic back and forth has been pretty much shut down. But yes, they are not in custody, and they can leave to go back to Mexico at any time.
Thank you, Anastasia Bolton, live in Del Rio.
The people who are crossing our border are intending to stay. And look at this. There's like 50,000 people who have crossed and don't even have a court date. Right. Don't even have a court date. So there's zero chance they'll show up for a court date that they don't even have. They're definitely intending to stay. And the people who do have a court date, only about 13% have showed up for that at all. There's hundreds of thousands of people being let loose into the interior with no way to track them, no way to get them back, and no way to enforce our laws. Look, this is such a dereliction of constitutional duty that Biden has engaged in. It's egregious. It's egregious. And it's also dangerous because guess what else is coming across the border? Hundreds and hundreds of pounds of fentanyl. Okay, human trafficking is occurring at record levels as well. So this is dangerous to our people. It's dangerous because of the pandemic. It's dangerous because of fentanyl overdoses, and it's blatantly unfair and immoral when considering that there's thousands of people around the world who want to come to this country. They want to do it the right way, and our system is so clogged up that they can't do it.
Migrant apprehensions and migrant deaths are up this year. News 11's Arlette Youssef continues our border coverage.
Migrant deaths in the Yuma sector are already up to, and the fiscal year is not over yet. 30 migrant deaths, nearly 4 times higher compared to last year's 7 reported deaths. On top of that, migrants are getting assaulted by criminals.
We've got several instances on video where migrants are getting robbed and showing bandit activity out in our AOR.
The Yuma sector area of responsibility accounts for not only the border, but also the desert surrounding it.
They're doing everything they can to take advantage of the traffic coming over, whether they're robbing them or impeding their travel. There's a lot of that kind of activity going on here.
Dulesky says the bandits are not U.S. citizens and are likely from Mexico. Once they see a vulnerable group of migrants trying to make it across the border, they interfere, all while apprehensions at the border are at record highs.
Over the weekend, we had over 2,400 apprehensions, kind of a record weekend for us. Friday alone, we had over 940. That's the biggest number this fiscal year.
Dulesky says there were at least 13 groups of 40 or more migrants.
We're finding that a lot of these groups are coming over in air-conditioned buses or vans, stuff like that. I think more of the word's getting out that they're able to come, and once they cross, they're able to stay.
Some unknowingly shuttled by the cartel.
Cartels have transportation systems along with recruiting systems that aid them coming through Mexico. And once they get here, they're just stepping off a bus and walking across the border and looking for a Border Patrol agent to turn themselves into.
Rescues have also gone up to over 420 this year. Last year, there were just over 100. As a result, all Yuma sector holding facilities are over capacity. Still, agents have been able to make the limited space work. Reporting in Yuma, Arlette Youssef, News 11.
And now on to border apprehensions in the Yuma sector. Over 2,400 migrants were captured throughout the weekend. Chief Patrol Agent Cresty Clem clarifies that several large groups and a human smuggling load were also included in the seizures. Sharing photos from the field, Chief Clem says border security is national security.
Welcome back. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he has not heard from the president since Joe Biden took office. Abbott is asking Biden to issue an emergency declaration amid the crisis on the border as Texas state troopers deploy to Del Rio to regain control. This week, we had a peak of 15,000 illegal immigrants who were under this massive bridge. They set up a massive tent city. And the Biden administration says it's going to raise the refugee cap from Afghanistan to 125,000. So you've got people coming in through Mexico, 200,000 every month. And then you've got Afghan refugees coming in from Afghanistan. And Joe Biden wants to raise the cap so the U.S. Makes them legal as soon as possible. Joining me right now is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. AG Paxton, it's great to see you again. Thanks very much for joining us. I can't even imagine what you're going through there in Texas. When I look at this Del Rio bridge, now we spoke with Bill Malusian, who's on the ground outside of that Del Rio bridge, and he said now the number is around 10,000 people under the bridge. We don't know if it's 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, but the pictures are just incredible. Can you give us a sense of what's going on in Texas right now and the situation at the border?
Well, I do think a picture's worth 1,000 words. People seeing what happened with the Haitians and the large number of people that were congregating. Look, from the very beginning, this illegal immigration problem, it wasn't an accident. Joe Biden invited them in violation of federal law. He's been doing that from the beginning. He gave Haitians special protection so that they wouldn't be deported and sent the message, just like he's been doing from day one of his administration. The message is very clear. We have federal laws. We're not going to follow them. I'm not going to follow them. Come to Texas. Come to Arizona. Come to our country. We'll let you in. We're not worried about any of the problems associated with it. That is the reality we have to accept.
Is there anything you can do about it? You've been suing this administration. You've sued the administration several times over its radical policy. What can you do to stop this flow of people coming in and eventually just getting lost in the country and becoming legal?
Yeah, I feel like we're having some impact. I mean, we're going to have to see how the numbers play out over the next couple months from our stay in Mexico implementation that we have forced the Biden administration to put back in place. So I don't know how those numbers are turning out, but clearly this Haitian thing is a whole different way of getting people in. The Afghan refugees coming a whole different way of getting people in there. They have a plan, and every time we sue them over what they're doing illegally, they try a new plan. So I don't know how those numbers are going to turn out. I hope that they're going down, but if they're not, we'll have to go back and sue them again.
So Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said that the administration is increasing deportation flights. He said that there are flights going to Haiti, sending some people back. National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judd, though, told me this morning that the White House is making a show of deporting only a handful of people from the Del Rio area, and they're doing it as a distraction as more Haitians are being let in. AG, whoever we're sending back, there's tens of thousands coming behind them. So where is this going?
Well, I think Brandon's right. This is a show. They're sending a few back to say, hey, look, we are taking care of this problem. But in reality, the Haitians know, and people know, that they can get into this country. Catch and release is alive and well. Instead of catching people and deporting them, everyone knows you're going to be released, and you have the opportunity to be sent around the country to places that we don't even know where they're being sent. But the reality is, no, this is a show. Their goal, as much as possible, is to get as many people into this country as fast as possible. And the numbers by the end of the Biden administration, we may be talking 10 million new people that are just part of our country as potential voters for them down the road.
Wow. So talk about the pressure that brings, because when you've got 10 million new people here who are actually not legal, there are services that the government will give them, and that creates a cost. Can you tell us what that looks like in the year or two ahead?
Well, that's going to affect us long term in lots of ways. Obviously, higher crime. The cartels will have much more infrastructure built into this country. That will be something I think we'll see over the coming years, because they're going to have connections to these people that they're sending around because they brought them in. Some of them are beholden to the cartels, so you're going to see a lot more of that. You're going to see more importation of fentanyl and more people dying from that. You're going to see more human trafficking. The way the Biden administration looks at all of this, they know all of this is happening. They know that there's going to be more spread of COVID. They're fine with that as long as they get more people into this country. It's clear that this is a plan and that they know exactly what they're doing.
So all of those people are not being tested for COVID then?
No, they're not all being tested. They're being moved around the country. I've talked to police officers who tell me they see buses come in the middle of the night and they're emptied with illegals, and they get emptied and these people walk off. They're not tested, and they're spreading COVID. So all this lecturing about the vaccine and trying to force Americans to get the vaccine and the mask issue, it's not reality, because they are spreading COVID and they have no problem with it.
Unbelievable. And yet the rest of us have to show our vaccine cards anywhere we go. Kids are now being encouraged to get boosters. This is insanity. A.G. Paxton, thanks very much. You're on the front lines, and we so appreciate all that you're doing to keep America safe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Democrats hoping to get immigration reform included in the more than $3 trillion spending bill dealt a big blow after the Senate parliamentarian says it can't be done.
The decision leaves one dreamer feeling very uneasy. News 4 Tucson's Eric Fink joins us live in studio now with the story. Eric.
So, guys, remember, the Senate is 50-50 right now. Democrats hope to pass a spending bill that included a plan for dreamers and other undocumented immigrants without having to get rid of the filibuster. They were told no on the immigration part. And one dreamer tells us she's very frustrated that this feeling of limbo continues.
It's really difficult to not lose hope in the midst of so much pain and uncertainty.
30-year-old dreamer Reina Montoya was born in Tijuana. She says when she was 10, her family fled violence in Mexico. She's lived in Arizona since 2003. Reina started Aliento, a nonprofit that works with dreamers and fights for a pathway to citizenship for thousands living across Arizona.
I just feel heartbroken. I feel that constantly, like my life and the life of thousands of dreamers across our nation continues to be a game.
Late Sunday night, the Senate parliamentarian, the interpreter of the rules in the upper chamber, says immigration reform can't be part of the estimated $3.5 trillion spending package. With an evenly divided Senate, a process known as reconciliation was thought to be a possible path to finally putting dreamers on a pathway to citizenship. But instead, it's back to the drawing board for some in Congress working to find a permanent solution for dreamers, farm workers, and others.
We've had multiple opportunities over the past decade plus to try and resolve this situation, what to do with so many undocumented immigrants, including so many with DACA. And here we are again, stuck with, nothing.
In a statement, Senator Mark Kelly's office said, quote, Senator Kelly continues to believe that dreamers have been waiting far too long for certainty and a pathway to citizenship and remains committed to working in the Senate to find a path forward. Reyna says the fight goes on.
And we're not going to give up because we don't have the luxury to give up. It's our lives that we're talking about.
Now, tonight, some senators are looking to find another way to include immigration reform for dreamers and others into that spending bill. California's Alex Padilla and Illinois' Dick Durbin says they are working on an alternative proposal to be unveiled in the coming days. Stay tuned for that. I'm Eric Fink, News 4 Tucson. Amanda, back to you.
Laura Allen here. She's a rancher, former county judge. Let's talk about how Texas DPS are the ones securing Texans here. They are the ones that are enforcing laws on your land.
Absolutely. The governor gave us the ability to have Texas prosecute trespassing on our property. And in our case, we do ranch. We own a large piece of property here. Just a couple of days ago, we had 23 illegals come through our property. These were Mexicans, Mexican citizens. And we actually intervened and had them taken from Border Patrol, handed over to DPS for prosecution. They're being processed for criminal trespassing. And so that has enabled a lot of the landowners here to have another mechanism while Border Patrol is busy here at the bridge dealing with what they have to deal with. DPS has stepped in and been able to do something out in the areas that Border Patrol is not able to get to.
And DPS has already cited about 1,000 folks that have been on Texas property.
Images of Haitian migrants being hit with whips and other forms of physical violence is completely unacceptable. This behavior must be addressed, and we must provide accountability. The images turn your stomach. It must be stopped, this kind of violence. Right now, I'm told there are 4 flights scheduled to deport these asylum seekers back to a country that cannot receive them. Such a decision defies common sense. It also defies common decency and what America is all about. Remember that harbor, that lady in the harbor, in the city in which I live. We cannot continue these hateful and xenophobic Trump policies that disregard our refugee laws.
A hateful and xenophobic hangover from Donald Trump's administration. The words there of Democratic U.S. Senate Leader Chuck Schumer today as he urged President Biden to end mass deportations of Haitian migrants. Thousands of migrants, many from Haiti, are camped under the Del Rio Bridge that crosses from Mexico to the U.S. state of Texas. Many are facing deportation. Our Washington Bureau Chief Enos Pohl, she is in Texas covering this story for us. Good evening to you, Enos. In the 24 hours since you and I last spoke, this border crisis has become a matter for leaders of Congress in Washington. We just heard from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer there. He wants deportations to stop. But that is not the total fix for this problem, is it?
No, not at all, Brent. This would only fight the symptoms, but really not change the real causes for all those thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of migrants who are fleeing their countries to find a better life here in the United States. I assume that many of our viewers agree with Chuck Schumer that these images we saw were just like heartbreaking and disgusting. But it is interesting to have a listen to those people who live in areas in cities like Del Rio and how they feel about how one should handle the pure amount of migrants who just came. Let's have a listen into our report from Del Rio. It was supposed to be a happy moment, a relief to finally cross the border of the United States. But after months, sometimes years on the road, a dream quickly turned into a nightmare for these migrants from Haiti. We were hungry. They didn't give us a blanket or a piece of carton board to lay on. We were cold and dirty and everything. Everything happened to me. But thanks to God, I have a little bit of hope that everything will be okay. Taken from the bridge, he was brought to a facility where he could finally shower, eat, and put on fresh clothes. Roberto Marquez is fighting the deportation of the thousands of migrants who came here last week.
The solution is to bring some business people and they'll take care of this problem in 5 minutes. What they will do is they give him work, because that's what they're looking for.
For President Joe Biden, this is another crisis that he needs to address immediately. After his controversial withdrawal from Afghanistan, leading to tens of thousands of Afghans to resettle in the United States. The border town Del Rio, with its 36,000 inhabitants, is in crisis mode. The bridge to Mexico is closed, border control, police and military is everywhere. The whole world seems to watch how the United States are going to handle the 14,000 refugees who crossed the Rio Grande in the last few days.
I think the only people that were caught by surprise were the politicians, because the people on the ground, the citizens, former border patrol agents and the current law enforcement here, they knew this was going to happen. Under President Trump, we had the Remain in Mexico policy. Trump put pressure on Mexico, the trade specifically. And so when Mexico had an incentive to cooperate and be a good neighbor, they helped us out. But Biden came in and took all that off the table, and this is what has happened.
After waiting all day long, a bus finally arrives to pick up those migrants who can afford a ticket and prove that they have family in the US with whom they can stay. A glimmer of hope for some at a border where long journeys often come to a cruel end.
Ines, I was struck by the gentleman in your story there, Roberto Marquez, who said that they just need to bring business people to the area and give these migrants jobs. That's what they're looking for. But that's a very oversimplification of this crisis, isn't it? These people are not just looking for work if they're willing to give up on everything and head for the U.S., are they?
Ich war weg.
Ines, can you hear me? Ines, can you hear me? Do we have Ines? Unfortunately, it looks like we've lost our audio. Ines, you can't hear us, can you? Okay, unfortunately, we apologize for that. We've lost. Right. Yes, Ines, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Brent. Sorry, we had some technical issues.
That's okay. That's okay. Let me just ask you, the gentleman in your story, Roberto Marquez, he said just bring in some business people and give these migrants jobs. But isn't that an oversimplification of this situation?
That would indeed help many of those refugees. Brent, also those we talked to, they just said, we are here to work. We don't want government money for free, but we just want to work here in the United States.
All right, DW's Ines Pohl there in Texas, covering what is yet another migrant crisis at the border between the U.S. and Mexico. Ines, thank you.
Well, let's bring in Mike Howell, Heritage Foundation Senior Advisor for Government Relations and former Department of Homeland Security Oversight Counsel. Mike, thanks for being with us. I shudder to think what a thunderstorm in that area is going to look like, but I want to go to the president's remarks today. He said we will get the border under control. I got to ask you, Mike, What does he plan to do to make that happen? Because I don't see any policy changes on the horizon. Your thoughts?
You're exactly right. I expect none either. The policy changes that he would have to do are basically an undoing of his entire immigration and border security agenda. That was the agenda to undo everything Trump had put into place that got our border secure. They've been whittling away at what's left of border security policies, including Title 42, which is the categorical COVID exception to push migrants of certain classes back. And right now we see Schumer and company saying, no, you need to get rid of that altogether. The White House is being run by an activist base from the Open Borders lobby and George Soros staffers who are essentially Biden's beholden to. And this is who he gets his marching orders from. He's not really calling the shots in the White House. And Mayorkas isn't either.
Mike, my sense is this is about to get much worse before it gets any better. What we're seeing in Del Rito might just be the tip of the iceberg here. And we've had to redeploy Border Patrol from other areas of the border to Del Rio. That's leaving hundreds of miles of border more exposed than ever. Talk about what we might see as we get into October, November, and beyond.
Right. So August is supposed to be a low crossing period. Instead, it's at 200,000, about 4 times what it was the year before for last month. There are no signs of this slowing down. We've been hovering at about 200,000 illegal crossings a month for some time now, basically the duration of the Biden presidency. We're on track for over 2 million this year alone. We're going to shatter all records. It's not going to change because people who want to come here illegally are seeing it being so successful for those who tried before them. I don't expect it to get any better. And you're absolutely right. Border Patrol officers and agents are being taken off the line to go deal with processing these illegal aliens into the interior of the country where they'll stay forever. And they're not guarding the open areas of hundreds of miles of the border. That is where the people who wish to do lots of harm will go, whether to bring drugs, gangs, criminal activity. They're going completely unimpeded.
Mike, what's crazy to me here is you have a national border, and yet you have a state governor who's having to go to private landowners and say, we need to solve this ourselves because the national government won't deal with this. I understand Texas is just doing what it can, Mike, but this cannot be a workable approach for the entirety of our border going forward.
You're absolutely right. And this is why I call this Biden border crisis a constitutional crisis. Never before in our history has the president basically ceded our territorial integrity and sponsored an invasion into this country. The Constitution kind of assumes that the president will actually, and it mandates him to take and enforce the laws, take care of the laws. This president is completely ignoring him. And so now you have state governors who are basically caught up in this constitutional crisis where the federal government and the Department of Justice is saying you can't do a dang thing about people crossing into the border because that's our responsibility, but we're not going to do it ourselves. And so it's an impossible position for these states. Governor Abbott is taking some steps, but it's eventually going to get to a situation where the Biden administration is stepping in and physically stopping them from doing things to secure their own border.
Look, Texas is doing what it can. God bless them for that, but it cannot be the approach for the United States of America. Thank you, Mike. We'll be right back.
Too many. The images are haunting. Thousands and thousands of Haitians trying to cross the border into Texas to take refuge in the United States. So many, the U.S. is flying many right back to Haiti. The most disturbing images recently, Border Patrol agents literally trying to catch people with a lasso. Leo Blaze is from Haiti, now lives in Orlando. What is your gut reaction?
We're being treated like we're not human, like we're animals. Seeing that's stuff that you see in cowboy movies,
It's a scene that has provoked so much outrage that the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security has promised an investigation.
Any mistreatment or abuse of a migrant is unacceptable, is against Border Patrol policy, training, and our department's values.
Leo owns this shipping company in Orlando, and it's here family members can send things to Haiti that they need. Leo also makes sure relief supplies get to the poverty-stricken country when there's a disaster. And in Haiti, there's been plenty. The most recent, an earthquake that killed over 2,000 people. Months ago, the president was assassinated. How bad is it in Haiti?
Well, right now it's pretty bad. You know, they're burning cars, they're killing people. You know, right now we have gangs that's trying to fully take over. If they're willing to cross, you know, to different countries and across the ocean just to get to Texas, 9 out of 10, they don't have anything else. You're going back to nothing.
Leo says that's the kind of desperation that's driving people to risk it all. And he feels if flown back to Haiti, many people will most likely risk it all again. Michelle Meredith, West 2 News.
Ronna McDaniel, RNC chair, joins us now. Look, this is a full-blown humanitarian crisis on the border. We find, however, I think you know this, Vice President Harris is going to be interviewed on The View. She's be on The View this Friday. In all seriousness, what can Republicans realistically do about this crisis?
Well, I have to say, Stuart, she's doing The View. I'm sure she's going to be hosting Saturday Night Live soon because she certainly has no interest in addressing a real issue. As our first ever female vice president, wouldn't it be nice if she were actually tackling a crisis at our southern border, a humanitarian crisis? These kids are being trafficked. There's drugs coming across our border. But you know what? Go ahead, Kamala Harris. Go do The View. Go do Saturday Night Live. Let's be a Hollywood celebrity and instead hurt women in this role by not putting some gravitas behind being the first woman vice president.
It is a crisis, obviously. What can Republicans do?
Well, of course, you've seen Governor Abbott deploy his National Guard. You're seeing these border state governors deploy what they can and the resources they can. But this is a federal government issue. The Democrat Party turned on a magnet. They said, come to this country, the borders are open, and now we have this huge catastrophe that they won't even acknowledge. They won't go visit the border. The best thing we can do is elect Republicans in these midterms.
Now, I've got a new poll. It shows just 31% of Iowans, repeat, Iowans, approve of President Biden's performance. That is Iowa. We all know about where the caucuses are going to be. You've got to be feeling pretty good about that poll.
I do. I feel great about where we are and the energy we're seeing behind our party. I'm not feeling great about our country, about inflation. We're all paying more. We're not happy with what happened in Afghanistan, the defund the police movement, the border. I mean, I don't think anybody expected it could be this bad this quickly. And I think a lot of people are scratching their heads saying, how did this guy get elected? He's really damaging our country every day. And we can't wait for the midterms to get here. They can't get here soon enough so we can put Republicans in power, at least in the House and the Senate.
I'm told you're setting up boot camps for staffers in swing districts. If I can, is that right? Boot camps?
We sure are. We're all over the country. I mean, last week I was in Kansas and Wisconsin and Illinois, and we have staff out there. We're getting ready, Stuart, and we're teaching them how to use the tools, register voters, and make sure that we do everything we can to take back the House and the Senate, because that's the only way we put checks and balances back into the system. Biden is unchecked right now, and we need to make sure we have a government that works for the American people.
Most Republicans that I talk to are very confident that they can take back the House at least next year. You share that confidence, obviously.
I do. The historical trends are in our way. It's usually 26 seats in that first midterm. We need 5 to take back majority. Redistricting is in our favor. And the candidates we're recruiting are phenomenal. I'm not going to take anything for granted, though. We're going to work as hard as we can to make sure we win back those seats. And then the Senate, we need 1 seat to take back the majority. And as we're seeing our vice president refuse to go to the border, our president refuse to address the American people on key issues, we really do need checks and balance back in our government in Washington, D.C.
Got it. Ronna McDaniel, thank you very much for being here. Always appreciated, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.
Governor Greg Abbott held a news conference today to speak about security issues at the southern border and what it's facing down there. This is the scene in Del Rio, Haitian migrants making a crossing into the U.S.-Mexico border. Some reports suggest that as many as 14,000 migrants crossed before border agents began expelling plane loads of migrants from that area. And NBC News reporting that as many as 20,000 additional migrants in Colombia are considering making that same trek. Here's what the governor had to say today.
Because the Biden administration is doing nothing to secure our border, because the Biden administration has been promoting and allowing open border policies, it has been the state of Texas that had to step up and address this challenge and work with the local mayor, the local county judge, and the local sheriff.
And most Haitians crossing the Rio Grande illegally will likely face deportation to Mexico or to their countries of origin.
After President Joe Biden mandated COVID-19 vaccines for 100 million Americans, some social media users began asking why it doesn't include people who are in federal custody after entering the U.S. illegally. And Arizona's Attorney General filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration, claiming the president's executive order favors migrants over citizens because they're not subject to the mandate. So let's verify. Are migrants in immigration detention centers required to get the COVID-19 vaccine? Our sources are Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the Department of Homeland Security, the White House, a law professor at the University of Arizona, and the Congressional Research Service. During the pandemic, ICE detention facilities have struggled with COVID-19 outbreaks. Homeland Security began offering vaccines to detainees earlier this year, but ICE says it doesn't have the power to force people to get vaccinated. And that brings us to a key distinction between mandates and compelling or forcibly vaccinating someone. President Biden's executive order was a mandate, essentially telling large employers they need to make sure their workers are vaccinated, tested, or let them go if they don't have an exemption. The order doesn't compel employers to vaccinate their staff.
Workplace health and safety regulations cover all workers, whether they're documented, undocumented, citizens, not citizens. It doesn't matter. If you're working in a workplace that's covered by these regulations, you are going to have to fulfill one of these ways of ensuring health and safety in the workplace.
The Congressional Research Service says, except in a few circumstances, quote, no existing federal law expressly imposes vaccination requirements on the general population, unquote. And the CRS notes, in our nation's history, the federal government has only used its power to encourage vaccines, such as by funding research, purchasing injections, and mandating employers vaccinate their staff. So it's false that migrants in immigration detention centers are required to get the COVID-19 vaccine. With your Verify, I'm Brandon Lewis.
President Biden vowing to get the southern border under control, but better act quickly. While the administration works to deport thousands of mostly Haitian migrants from a squalid camp in Del Rio, Texas, more than 20,000 more Haitians are reportedly waiting in Colombia to make their way into the United States. Texas Governor Greg Abbott was down in Del Rio and unloaded on the president.
The Biden administration has been promoting and allowing open border policies. Failure to enforce laws that exist in the United States leads to chaos, and chaos leads to inhumanity. The Biden administration is a man-made disaster of inhumanity, of epic proportions. It must end. It must end immediately.
And the media and Democrats being accused of misrepresenting the facts for pushing a narrative that Border Patrol agents were whipping migrants. Watch.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation.
I was not aware that whips, people had that kind of equipment on them that they could use on humans.
There is obviously systematic racism at play here.
It does smack of a bygone era of slavery, aided by reports of people being beaten, whether with a riding crop or the reins.
Border Patrol is pushing back, saying agents and horse reins use horse reins. They're not whips. I want to point this out. Here's Secretary Mayorkas, who yesterday defended the Border Patrol. Today, he had changed his tune. Why? Watch him.
Images have come out of Border Patrol agents whipping Haitian immigrants. So my question to you, do you think that's a humane way to treat migrants?
You are assuming facts that have not yet been determined. To ensure control of the horse, long reins are used, but we are going to investigate the facts to ensure that the situation is as we understand it to be, and if it's anything different, we will respond accordingly. any mistreatment or abuse of a migrant is unacceptable. We are very troubled by what we have seen.
And with a lot more to come on that, but the investigation didn't happen overnight, and yet he changed his opinion. He must have gotten a phone call. Greg, this whole thing is bad, not just the whole made-up thing about the whip, but the situation is bad. There's a humanitarian crisis at the border as well.
But I don't care about the humanitarian crisis until I can find an angle that I like.
Yeah.
And that's what you just saw with these dumb hacks that you just saw in that montage. These networks, these people, had no interest in this story until they could create an acceptable villain in law enforcement. They didn't give two poops, and I said poop. I was going to say the other one, about the 12,000 refugees that were there. But, they discover a Twitter image in their doom scrolling, and it looks like a whip. And so they go full Covington, right? Chris Cuomo, Yamiki April, all these other bozos who pretend to be journalists, then pretend to have a story. Do you know that if the Democrats and the media had cared enough about this crisis from the time that we started covering it months ago and then weeks ago with this actual story would not exist. It wouldn't be necessary for guys to be on horses to help control the crowd. So when I say they're pulling a Covington, I mean this. They could not use the striking video that has been coming from Fox, from the drones and from the helicopters, because you cannot manipulate that image. Those images are real. It tells the whole story. But you can take one disturbing image, right? One disturbing image, and you can turn it and manufacture a narrative that is to your liking. These lazy hacks ignored the stark footage that had been coming out, and then suddenly they are outraged. We must reject these fools. They're disgusting, and they don't care.
Yeah, well, they don't care about the fact that we are a sovereign nation. We have the right to protect the border. They aren't taking a story that they're saying to you, don't believe your lying eyes. You've got a guy on a horse, Border Patrol, riding Western with split reins. You use a rein to get the horse to move this way or that way. If you're in a situation where there are people or another horse that's very close, it's a quick way to move the horse. It's got nothing to do with the people on the ground. It's you maneuvering your horse. And the fact that they would turn that into them doing something like whipping the illegals is outrageous. It is outrageous.
So the Border Patrol agents were attacked by the Vice President of the United States and now the Department of Homeland Security before an investigation, if they really need to do an investigation. Could they claim that they have a hostile workplace, Geraldo?
First of all, I have to say that, what is this, the Cisco Kid? You know, these are migrants fleeing a desperate situation. These aren't escaping inmates. And this behavior, this macho man behavior, is absolutely unacceptable.
How can you accuse anyone of macho behavior, Geraldo? That's been your career for 50 years.
I'm not. You may be right about that, but nevertheless, I appreciate our frontline uniformed services. They've got a tough job. There is a crisis at the border of Joe Biden's making. I concede that absolutely we have to do something. Trump did it better. I concede that. But when you have that happening, that shows an attitude that is absolutely unacceptable.
What are they doing wrong?
What are they doing? How would you like it if it was your ancestor coming across the damn Rio Grande and the guy on,
There's a guy on a horse trying to enjoy
Lash LaRue, and you make a distinction between he wasn't whipping. It wasn't I was a slave for 12 years, whatever that movie was. But there's a big reins and big horses, and he's trying to intimidate and terrorize.
You're interpreting an image. You're interpreting an image, Geraldo.
Sean, jump in.
If it was you, it wouldn't be interpretation.
But he's not breaking the law.
Hold on a second. I'm with Greg. Reject the fools, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, here you have Kamala Harris saying we need to treat them as human beings. The mistreatment, Mayorkas said, the mistreatment of migrants is unacceptable. I get that. But where in the hell have these people been when little girls are being sold into sex slavery? Little girls are dying in the desert. Their parents are dying in the desert. Drugs are flowing into the country. This has created mass human chaos.
How does the guy on horseback?
Hold on a second. Hold on.
That's his job to prevent it.
That's what I said.
We don't have it, but I watched a video before I came on the show where actually the migrants were pushing women in front of them into the horses themselves, and they're like, the Border Patrol is like, what are you doing pushing women into us? What kind of people are you? So, Geraldo, you can't take a small video and categorize Border Patrol, who has been doing yeoman's work on the humanitarian side on the border and castigate all of them. Democrats need to step up and go, listen, we've created this mess. We have a humanitarian crisis coming across Mexico into our border. Leave the Border Patrol alone. And if you're going to get outraged, don't get outraged at this video. Get outraged on the horrors that are taking place along the journey.
All of it outrages me, Sean. There's no doubt about it. This is a crisis. Joe Biden's kindness has created this cruelty. Kindness has created cruelty.
No.
But we still have to bend over backward. This is America. This is a place where we don't have horses chasing refugees.
This is a country of laws. This is a country with a border. We are a sovereign nation.
These aren't horses.
I don't care what they are. They are
people
coming here illegally.
Humanity. They're seeking a better life for their families, just like your parents.
Look, my parents came here illegally.
Brother, they do this in America. They do this in Times Square at last call. I've been there. When the horses come out to disperse crowds.
You probably had it coming.
Oh, there you go. The truth comes out.
You should have claimed asylum.
The old identity politics.
Claim asylum.
Yeah, identity
I think
Carmine's restaurant.
Yes. We'll get to that in my block.
Okay. The other thing is, Sean, that Kamala Harris, the press secretary, said she was working on the root causes. Mm-hmm. Where is that?
Well, it's a great point. Where are the root causes? Are they in the Northern Triangle? Are the root causes now in Haiti? Are the root causes all over the country?
Yeah, the root causes weren't necessarily, actually, that's a good point. In the report that she provided, that she didn't include.
The root causes are I want to come to America.
Exactly.
It's a land of
the
plenty.
root cause is everybody wants to live in America.
That's education, medication, housing, welfare, and you know what? Disability. I want all that. Maybe I want to work too.
There are 150,000 Haitians in New York City alone.
Good.
They are the best neighbors. They are business people. They are entrepreneurial. They are faith-based.
That's not the argument.
Mayorkas should be fired. I mean, you sit out here and say, my strategy is that I'm going to tell people not to come to the border, as opposed to shutting down the border. Judge, shut it down. Do what Trump did.
He needs some of the
send people back. But the Homeland Security, our Homeland Security is devastated by this kind of leadership.